Hello everyone, welcome to the class.
Hello everyone. Hello Professor Chen.
In the last section, we mainly talked about the beauty of early Tang and prosperous Tang poetry. Today, we're going to continue this topic.
In terms of artistic style, Li Bai's poems are elegant and unrestrained, while Du Fu's poems are gloomy and frustrated. They have both distinctive personality characteristics and rich connotations, which have a profound impact on the aesthetic interest of later generations' poems.
Yes, Du Fu's poems provided a vivid historical picture of the Tang Empire's transition from prosperity to decline before and after the Anshi rebellion, revealing and criticizing the dark reality of the portals, of the rich lake, of flesh and wine, while frozen bodies lie by the roadside.
Of course, the significance of Du's poems is not only to record history, but also to record the beating thoughts and emotional waves aroused by the turbulent times. Du Fu's poems are full of the sense of worrying about country and people, and the spirit of loving heaven and earth. They are the artistic expression of the core spirit of Confucianism and the image of the cultural character of the Chinese nation.
Du Fu wrote more than 1,400 poems throughout his life, which reflects the social life during the period of the Anshi turmoil in the Tang Dynasty and his lifetime of frustrations. His poems have become important reference materials for the study of history of that later age phase, thus are viewed as a mirror of the times in which the poet lived. Du Fu was respectively called the poet sage.
Spring Fuel by Du Fu.
On water land, streams flow and mountains stand. In vernal dawn, grass and weeds are all grown. Grieved all the years, flowers make me sad tears, hating to part. Hearing birds breaks my heart. The beacon fair has gone higher and higher. Words from household are worth their weight in gold. I cannot bear to squeeze my bristling hair. It grows too thin to hold a light hairpin.
This poem was written in the spring of AD 757 when Du Fu was captured by An Lushan's rebel army and locked up in Chang'an City. The first two lines point out the subject of the poem and tell the background, and they also set the sentimental keynote of the poem as a whole, recalling the flourishing days of the Tang Dynasty and now facing the occupied capital and a sparse population. The poet couldn't help feeling depressed. Grass and weeds are overgrown implies the consequences of the war.
The third and fourth lines use flowers and birds to express feelings. The spring flowers and birds were in fact joyful, but in the eyes of the poet, who was extremely sorrowful, they reminded him of the past and made him shed tears. Faded flowers could bloom again, but the conquered country was hard to be restored. The birds were singing freely and inviting their friends, while the poet was alone without any relatives or friends around him. The birds' singing startled his heart. Worrying about the nation and grieving at himself are two emotional thrust of this poem.
The last 4 lines describe the raging battles everywhere and the smoke signals rising on all sides. The war caused turbulence to the country and suffering to the people. When could he have any news of his family members and reunite with them? Facing these questions unable to be answered, the poet had to scratch his head all day that his hair, which had turned grey on anxiety long ago, got thinning out quickly.
This poem concerns the affairs of both the state and his family, and conveys the poet's eager yearning for his family members and his love for his motherland. Feeling and setting happily blended. The poem, exquisite in language, vivid and rich in content and profound in meaning, is one of the excellent representative works of Zhufu's realistic poems.
There are 2 main schools of poetry in the Middle Tang Dynasty. One is led by Bai Juyi with Yuan Zhen, Zhang Ji, Wang Jian, Li Shen, and others as followers. They mainly inherited Du Fu's spirit of facing reality and attacking darkness, and strengthened the satirical function of poetry. In art, they were characterized by popular and fluent language and approachable style.
The other school is headed by Han Yu with Meng Jiao, Jia Dang, Li He, and others are follows. They mainly inherit Zhu Fu's spirit of seeking innovation and being brave in creation in art, especially focusing on the artistic realm that has not yet been explored in Zhu Fu's poems. Their artistic features are unique language, magnificent style, secluded beauty, and grotesque style.
In terms of the diversity of poetic styles and the uniqueness of the poet's artistic personality, the mid-Tang poetry world is like 100 flowers in full bloom.
Poems by Bai Juyi in his early and later periods differ a lot in style. When he enjoyed the trust of the emperor, his poems were of a straightforward and broad style without scruples. They were positive and progressive, reflecting the sufferings of the people and exposing the years of the times. When he lost the trust of the emperor, his poems were pedestrian, and he was addicted to alcohol and believed in Buddhism, avoiding arousing suspicion and calamity.
Bai Juyi was a prolific writer, and nearly 3,000 pieces of his poems have been handed down to the present day. Most of his poems are plain and easy to understand, with accurate wording and subtle descriptions. During his lifetime, his poems had spread far and wide among people and even abroad. The Old Charcoal Seller by Bai Juyi.
What's the old man's affair? He cuts the wood in southern hills and fares his way. His face is grimed with smoke and streaked with ice and dust. His temples grizzled and his fingers all turned black. The money made by selling charcoal is not just enough for food and clothing for his mouth and back. Although his coat is thin, he hopes winter will set in, for while the cold will keep up the charcoal's good price. At night, a foot of snow falls outside city walls. At dawn, his charcoal cart crosses ruts in the ice. The sun is high, the ox tired out and hungry. Outside the southern gate in snow and slush they rest. Two riders canter up. Alas, who can they be? Two palace heralds in the yellow jacket, dressed, decree in hand, with its imperial order. One says, they turn the cart about, and at the ox they shot. A cartload of charcoal, 1,000 caddies weighs. They drive the cart away. What dare the old man say? 10 feet of sail and 20 feet of gaze, deep wide. That is the payment they fasten in the ox head.
This short narrative poem enjoys great popularity, as its language is plain and easy to understand, through the recounting of an old charcoal seller's miserable experience. It expressed the poet's strong detestation against the court-by and his deep sympathy for the working people. Court-by is a way of purchase used by the imperial court of the Tang Dynasty, through which the eunuch at court or small officials would seize things as they pleased. Sometimes they would not pay a single cent, and sometimes they gave used or useless things like pieces of silk and satin of the court for payment.
The first 12 lines tell the process how the old man made charcoal and carried it to the market, and portray the character of the old charcoal seller from 3 aspects: his appearance, feelings and actions, and the psychological description is especially outstanding. The poet expressed his mixed feelings with the lines, "The poor old man was thinly clad," worrying that his charcoal would sell cheap. However, he would rather the weather were cold. They show that the old man suffered from poverty, and what he desired to seek was only food and clothing.
The latter 8 lines give an account of how the court officials plundered the old man. More than 1,000 jin of charcoal was taken away from the old man. All of a sudden, his tough works had been wasted. His desires to seek only food and clothing vanished into the air, and the hope of the whole family's clothing and food was destroyed, which reflects the feudal rulers' cruel exploitation against the working people who lived hard and miserable lives.
After a short period of resurgence in Yuanhe period, the power of the Tang Dynasty tended to decline. In the late Tang Dynasty, the scholars were deeply worried about the state affairs and the hopelessness of the Tang Dynasty's resurgence, which had an important impact on the poetry of the late Tang Dynasty.
The basic characteristics of poetry in the late Tang Dynasty are as follows. First, in terms of emotional connotation, poetry in the late Tang Dynasty rarely shows open and transcendent spiritual atmosphere and passion full of idea, temperament, but more turns to the expression of the general contents of the spiritual world, such as daily human feelings and love between men and women. The lyric tone is mainly sentimental and low return, showing subtle and delicate, gorgeous, elegant, and distant. The main performance style is resentment, saddening, satire, and so on. Secondly, in terms of artistic connotation, on the one hand,
the late Tang poetry inherited the creation direction of artificial beauty in the Middle Tang poetics, developed the style of painstaking shading since the Middle Tang dynasty, and formed a unique artistic orientation of deep euphemism. On the other hand, it adjusted the Middle Tang poetics, showed its reply to the prosperous Tang poetics. At the same time, it also shows the tendency of paying attention to plain and meaning. The above two aspects together create the artistic conception of the poetry in the late Tang dynasty, which is soft, delicate, and small, and adds a very unique scenery to the art world of Chinese classical poetry. Li Shangyin and Du Mu were the most successful poets in the late Tang dynasty.
Li Shangyin drifted from place to place and underwent all kinds of sufferings. His prospects were very dim. This made him melancholy and fickle. These experiences had a great effect on his poems. As a result, his poems are various in style to show being solemn and starry, or sorrowful and lonely, sometimes being deeply thoughtful or rather dispirited. His love poems have their distinguishing features. They were written in a luxurious style, showing detailed descriptions and sincere feelings, and often published with the title without title,
To One Unnamed, by Li Shangyin.
It's difficult for us to meet and hard to part. The east wind is too weak to revive flowers died. Spring silkworm till it dies, spins silk from love's sick heart. White candles that one burned up have no tears to shed. At dawn I'm brave to sink. Your mirrored hair turns gray. At night you would feel cold, while I croon by moonlight. To the three fairy isles it is not a long way. Will the bluebirds all fly to see you on the head?
This is one of the most famous unnamed poets of Li Shangyin. The first two sentences express the sincere feeling in commoners. The second couplet contains two metaphors, vividly showing their true love to each other. A silkworm spins very long and delicate silk, and when the silk is exhausted, the silkworm dies. When burning, a candle sheds tears until the end of its life.
There have appeared various interpretations of this poetic masterpiece in the past hundreds of years. Basically, it is a love poem, the best one of all love poems, with its exquisite language, yet artifices, appropriate metaphors, and sincere feelings. The poem may be rated as a first-class poetic masterpiece.
Poem of Tang Dynasty is indeed a splendid art treasure house, and the most magnificent and shining point of Chinese traditional culture. The Chinese nation has contributed such a beautiful treasure to human culture, which is always worthy of our pride.
Yes, just like the old saying, after reading 300 Tang poems, you can recite even if I can't write poems. I hope you can spend some time after class to read some poetry every day or every week to add a little poetry to your life. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. See you next time.